Good morning, everyone. Good morning. About 4 minutes until showtime. 4 minutes until showtime. So please come in and take your seats, and we'll get started here in about 4 minutes. Three minutes until showtime. If anyone in the audience would like to ask a question, you can scan the QR code there on the screen and submit your questions for Jonathan and the panel. 3 minutes till showtime. Just as a reminder, please, everyone in the audience, please silence or turn off your cell phones. Please silence or turn off your cell phones, please. 1 minute till showtime.
We at AppHarvest have set a goal to be one of the largest food and agriculture producers in the world. We have a workforce that is unmatched.
One of the world's largest agri-tech greenhouses in Morehead, Kentucky.
First of all, I love the flavor. They are so good.
something that's been very, very near and dear to the AppHarvest team since the beginning. We've tried to say that we're not building facilities, we're building an ecosystem, and today is just another step in that direction. This will be, we've got students on the farm right now that came in from 3 or 4 different high schools. I know we've set this up to live stream, and we've got people tuning in across the US and some of our friends over in Europe. Together here in Moorhead, we've really put this community on the global stage. And as part of that, we wanted to do this World Food Symposium every year around UN World Food Day. The UN has highlighted the food security issues globally that we're facing, and the food insecurity issues that people all around the US and around the world are facing every day. We're in the largest economy in the world, the largest agriculture economy in the world. And there's no reason that every young person doesn't have access to healthy fruits and vegetables. I know we've got a couple of folks speaking today. First, I'll be with Steve Case, who we'll get to in a moment. And then next, Ashley Smith, the founder and CEO of Black Soil, and Holly Harris Phillips, the CEO of Appalachian Regional Healthcare. We'll bring in Steve, I think, up on the screen here. But Steve Case was the founder of AOL, but I got to know Steve and his team through Revolution's Rise of the Rest Seed Fund, where Steve has been investing all across the US, and AppHarvest absolutely would not be possible without the early belief and investment from Steve's team. I know a lot of us here at AppHarvest truly believe that the next great companies will come from Middle America, and Steve's team has been investing in those companies. 80% of venture capital goes to New York City, Boston, and San Francisco, while the rest of the country fights for 20% of that venture capital, which is what fuels innovation and then fuels job growth. There we go, Dean. Thank you. Steve, welcome, tuning in virtually.
Good morning, Jonathan.
How are you doing? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. It's great to be with you on World Food Day. Glad you're doing this.
Well, thank you. Steve, I know food has been an important topic to you. You're an early investor in Sweetgreen, an early investor in Kava, but would just love to hear, what do we do to continue to move the food tech ecosystem forward, and not just do it in 2 or 3 cities, but do it all across the country?
Well, there's a bunch of things. As you mentioned in the setup, it's crazy that venture capital goes to so few entrepreneurs in so few places. Those places, Silicon Valley and others, tend to do pretty well. Other places like Moorhead, Kentucky, have felt kind of left behind. So we have to back entrepreneurs with great ideas that can change the world in fundamental ways everywhere, not just in a few places. So that's really been the focus of our Rise of the Rest effort. And we're so proud to have been the early seed investor. When you're in the farming business, it's, seed investing takes on a different context, but early seed investor when AppHarvest was just an idea, but we were captivated by your vision in terms of what you were trying to build. More broadly, in terms of your question around food, it's a huge market, obviously, just from a size of the market. What the investors look at, total addressable market, or TAM. And in the case of food, it's 100%. Everybody's eating, but as you well know, and this, the purpose of World Food Day is to focus on, not everybody has, just as capital is not spread evenly, food's not spread evenly. So we need to do a better job of making it and growing it. We need to do a better job of distributing it. We need to do a better job in terms of how we sell it. We need to do a better job in terms of sharing it, so there's less food waste. There's a lot of things that need to happen, and historically it's been the government leading and nonprofits leading, and obviously those are critical. But we also need to add the benefit of innovative entrepreneurs thinking about new possibilities and building companies that can scale that. That's really been our focus at Revolution, finding those entrepreneurs like you in places where most venture capitalists aren't really looking, kind of understanding their their perception of what's going to happen in the future, their vision for how they can build a company that not only can be a valuable company, but also an impactful company. And I do think the entrepreneurs unleashed can be helpful in solving the problem around food, the problem around healthcare, the problem around climate. There's a number of major issues. Obviously, they're interrelated, and it's great that entrepreneurs that maybe 10 years ago were a little too focused on photo apps and social media, they're now focusing on some of the most fundamental challenges facing our world, but also some of the most fundamental opportunities to build companies that can have a significant impact alongside of the work of governments, alongside of the work of NGOs.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, Steve, so for those that aren't familiar with your book, The Third Wave, An Entrepreneur's Vision of the Future, I know I've got some friends in the area that are tuning in watching this today. To those entrepreneurs or innovators, what advice do you give to them? And as you just mentioned it, we're in a world where private sector must be a part of these solutions. We can't leave it up to government. We can't leave it up to NGOs alone. But as new entrepreneurs and innovators are building companies, what advice would you give them? And obviously kind of framing this through the lens of the third wave, but just what general advice would you give to these entrepreneurs in middle America that do want to build the next great idea?
Well, first I'll frame a little bit of the third wave for people who are not familiar with it. I had the opportunity to be part of 1985, so 36 years ago, when only 3% of people were online. They're only online 1 hour a week, and we and others helped stand up the internet, help build the commercial internet. And now essentially everybody's connected, and it's had obviously a fundamental impact in terms of everyday life. That was sort of the first wave of the internet, getting everybody connected, building the on-ramps, building the servers, building the infrastructure to allow people to connect to the internet. That's where companies like AOL and Yahoo and many others played such a central role. That was sort of most of the 80s, most of the 90s. The last couple decades have been the sort of the second wave of the internet, and that really has been software apps running on top of the internet, because in that first wave we built the infrastructure that you didn't have to do that anymore, so it was building on top of it. Facebook, Google, all these companies that we now know essentially are apps on smartphones for the predominantly that were drivers of the second wave. The third wave is really where I think the internet meets the real world, and it obviously food and health and things like that we're talking about today are front and center, and I think it's great that entrepreneurs are focusing on that, but I do think it requires a different mindset and kind of entrepreneurial roadmap that in this third wave, partnerships are going to be very important, and obviously you've demonstrated that with AppHarvest. It's not just what you do; it's the network you build around the company that allows it to really scale. Policy is very important, whether it be agriculture policy or healthcare policy or financial fintech financial services policy. There's a lot of issues that you have to understand because these are so central, both the industries and the impact that things like food and health and money have on people's everyday lives. The government is going to play a role, and you have to engage with policymakers to try to influence that policy in an important way. And the last one, and you certainly know this, is perseverance. I mean, changing food systems, what you're trying to build with AppHarvest is not an overnight success. It's not like you drop an app in the App Store and suddenly everybody takes off like wildfire. These are more like 10-year plus journeys, and so entrepreneurs have to kind of take a longer view. So I'd say in terms of the advice is focus on a big problem, a challenge that really is facing the world that needs fresh thinking, kind of a battle worth fighting, a mountain worth climbing, and then bring a approach to it that really is focused on partnerships, focused on policy, and recognizes the importance of perseverance. And I just say, Jonathan, it's been so amazing to watch what you've done. Starting when we first invested, it was really an idea on a napkin. We were believing in you and your vision, and there was a lot of risk associated with it. You've basically demonstrated that it wasn't just an idea; it's now up and running, a significant business, and the fact that you've created, I don't know what the current number is, 500-600 jobs in Appalachia, which a lot of people felt was, it was kind of left behind when the coal industry was in decline, and the fact that Kentucky, where you are, there's 70% of the U.S. population is within a 24-hour drive, and the fact that you're using rainwater, so you're really dramatically over 90% less water than, which obviously is a problem with farming. That's exactly what we need more of. People like you who say there's a better way. Food systems need fresh thinking. I'm going to build a company to do that. I'm going to work with NGOs. I'm going to work with the government, but I'm going to try to scale a company that really can change the world.
Well, Steve, obviously what we're doing is not possible without Rise of the Rest. And for us, having this here today, many community members are here. I know many community members are tuning in. One thing we've tried to say from day one is that we're not building facilities, we're building an ecosystem. And I know your team has spent a lot of time on that ecosystem model, but how important is it for the community members around these entrepreneurs and innovators to support these initiatives together holistically? And just, as I do know that we have many community members listening today, how important of a role do they have in shaping the ecosystems to make investors like you leaning into communities to invest, also making it possible for entrepreneurs to succeed? How important is it for the communities to play a part in developing the ecosystems that can have a rock bed for thriving entrepreneurs and new companies?
I think it's critically important. As we travel around the country now, we've done our bus tours to, I think it's 45 different cities across the country. We've made 180 investments in over 80 cities, 35 states. So we've been around much of the country. And when we try to understand what the challenges and the opportunities are, they're always a little bit different, obviously, in terms of one city versus another city, one state versus another state. But there are some things that, kind of overarching things that we have noticed. One is, as we said at the beginning, this dearth of capital. The fact it is so hard for the entrepreneurs in these places to get that initial seed funding from people in the community. So the community focusing more on that makes sense. Another area is around people, around talent. We have seen in many parts of the country a brain drain where people growing up in places like Moorhead who wanted to be part of the future, wanted to be part of the innovation economy, felt they had to move away. There wasn't really opportunity there in terms of startups and so forth. So they went to the coast, many to Silicon Valley, some to other places. How do you slow that brain drain of people leaving for better opportunities and actually create almost a boomerang of people returning because there's a sense of possibility? And we're starting to see that in many cities. And that's, again, is a role that the community has to play. And the third is really believing in the power of ideas, the power of entrepreneurship, recognizing that, of course, startups are risky, but doing nothing is riskier still, and just relying on traditional companies that at some point will be in decline is riskier still. So you've got to believe in these entrepreneurs, you've got to support these entrepreneurs, you have to have a culture of possibility, of creativity, of innovation. And that's what was most encouraging to me about our work now coming up on a decade with the Rise of the Rest. There are more parts of the country that really are starting to get a little bit more capital. They're starting to win that battle around talent, and they're starting to understand the importance of startup ecosystems and the importance of really kind of leaning into the future and not just kind of focused in the rearview mirror on the past. One last point is that if you look at the largest companies, the Fortune 500 companies, half of them turn over every 25 years. So if you're not planting the seeds for the companies of tomorrow, your community is going to be in decline down the road. And we've seen that in many parts of the country that were super strong 100 years ago, maybe in the Industrial Revolution, but then those cities kind of lost their way. Many of those cities are finding their way back, and it's very encouraging. I think it has great opportunity for entrepreneurs everywhere, great opportunity for innovation everywhere. Also, if we can create jobs everywhere, we can hope everywhere, and opportunity everywhere, maybe it's also going to help knit together a very divided country. So I think the work that you and other entrepreneurs we're backing are doing is critically important, not just building a company, but building a community and building a brighter future for our country.
Well, Steve, to bring it back to food, and what we said at AppHarvest when we were first starting the company was food and agriculture. You would imagine the next great companies probably it's better to be situated in the middle part of the U.S. So I think there's a natural advantage for many companies looking to disrupt food and agriculture being in the middle of the U.S., not being in a Boston, New York, or San Francisco. With that, As an investor, what do you see exciting in the food space? If you're talking to other investors, how do we get private sector capital being a part of the solution? Some of the back of the envelope numbers is, the U.S. spends $5 trillion a year on healthcare. We spend $2 trillion a year on food. $2 trillion of the $5 trillion that goes to healthcare is really is because of health-related outcomes based on food. So you look at high fructose corn syrup, sugars, saturated fats. I mean, that's what we're eating. There's so many things we can do to disrupt food. Part of it ties into health. But as an investor, looking at Middle America, looking for disruptive ideas, what do you see that's exciting in the food space that you think could potentially give companies in the middle part of the U.S. an advantage as they build and grow their company?
Well, I think you framed it really well. That food is a huge industry. It's sort of become an industrialized food system, and with often, unfortunately, not particularly healthy options. And so, rethinking that, reimagining that, reinvesting in that it becomes critically important. And that's what we've been trying to do in Revolution. To be honest, when we first made some of these investments in food and also in health a decade ago, most people were, including in our industry, the investment industry, were kind of skeptical. It seems like venture capital should be backing like tech startups that are building software, enterprise software, or software on apps and so forth. The investing in the food industry, companies like Sweetgreen, which is a fast casual concept, or Revolution Foods, which does healthy meals for schools, just struck people as odd. And on the healthcare side, a lot of venture capitalists were scared away by it because of the fact that there's a government aspect to it. And unfortunately, our system has become much less consumer centric and much more payer kind of centric, and much less about healthcare and much more about sick care. And that just seemed complicated and hard. And so a lot of venture capitalists backed off. But we leaned in because we really believe those are some of the both biggest challenges to deal with, but also biggest opportunities in terms of building companies. And we leaned in, as you framed it, not just by investing in companies in Silicon Valley, but by investing in companies all over the country, including in Eastern Kentucky. And thankfully, over the last decade, we've seen more investors starting to pay attention to other cities, starting to invest in these sectors that they may have not been interested a decade ago. So I do think you'll see more capital flowing into food and ag, into healthcare. I do think you'll see more investors on the coast backing companies in the middle of the country. So I'm encouraged by what we're seeing. And frankly, the pandemic may turn out, despite how many terrible aspects to it in terms of the loss of lives and jobs and so forth, one silver lining, I hope, will be it did force a sort of almost like a shake the snow globe moment in terms of how people think about life and work, and that's changing sort of how even companies are operating. But also a little bit in the investment world has got people thinking more about the opportunities in other places, and some people even have moved. Some venture capitalists have moved from Silicon Valley to other places. When they get there, they say, "Oh, I had no idea there were so many interesting things happening in the startup community in that particular city." So hopefully over the next decade, we'll continue to see momentum around capital going to more people and more places, around capital going to big problems that need big solutions, and we'll start leveling the playing field in terms of entrepreneurship and start dealing with some of these fundamental issues, which obviously is the focus of World Food Day. How do you solve some of these problems? Again, recognizing there's a critical role of government, a critical role of NGOs, but also a critical role for business, and not just the big business that often will want to preserve the status quo, but the new businesses, the startups, the entrepreneurs that are trying to reimagine and create a brighter future.
And speaking of COVID, how is the COVID-19 pandemic, in your eyes, what is the opportunity coming out of COVID, to reshape a food system that really aligns our interest on health outcomes and prevention? And again, from an investor's viewpoint, how has COVID highlighted some of these cracks in our food system, and where do you think the opportunities are coming out of COVID?
Well, the first wave of COVID was really about supply chain issues around masks and ventilators and so forth. And I think we woke up and realized that as a country we had outsourced way too much and needed to bring more of that back. That is starting to fuel more investment in manufacturing, not just in sectors directly related to COVID or even healthcare, but more broadly. How do you rethink kind of manufacturing and bring more of that kind of home and have more control of your destiny, if you will. So that's one part of it. As the pandemic continued on, we started seeing issues in many other aspects of our lives, and now there's a massive, huge supply chain issue that's really impacting a lot of different industries. Perhaps the economy may impact inflation, other kinds of things, because we just don't have a distribution system, a logistics system that can handle the current the current needs. So there's now a lot of thinking about that and investment in that. And then of course in the food sector specifically, there's a growing recognition. Maybe it opens some people's eyes to the challenge of food insecurity in this country and around the world, and got more people kind of focusing on it. So again, the pandemic had been tragic in so many respects, and I don't want to make light of that, but maybe it's one of these moments where people do take a step back, do try to rethink what's important in their own lives, which is why you're seeing this separation a little bit between where you live and where you work, and how you live and how you work, for people just trying to think, well, maybe it should be different. Companies saying maybe it should be different, is focused particularly on things like pandemic kind of issues. How do we rethink that so we're ready next time? We know there'll be other pandemics. How do we make sure we do have a more resilient kind of system to handle that kind of response because of the connection with health and food that we talked about? How do we also kind of reimagine our food systems? And I think that's going to be the key, and you framed it well, which is these big challenges, whether it be climate, whether it be food, whether it be health, are clearly interrelated. That I remember even when I was growing up, you used to hear things like "you are what you eat," or "healthcare begins at the end of a fork." That really reminds us the importance that role food plays. Obviously, there are a lot of challenges around distribution of food, and even really reducing the massive waste of food by figuring out interesting ways to better manage what gets distributed to whom, and also redistribute there is less food waste. There's so many different challenges, and it's going to take everybody playing a role. The government has to be more flexible, not just do more of the same. NGOs have to be pushing the envelope in terms of what's possible, and funding some of these core programs that do help us in terms of dealing with food insecurity. And as I said before, the entrepreneurs like you, Jonathan, really need to continue to step up and really recognize that when there's a problem, there's also an opportunity. And if you're going to start a company, why not start a company that's focusing on something that really has significant impact in society, significant impact on the world? And that's why we're so proud to be backing AppHarvest and you.
Well, thank you, Steve. And with that, if we can inspire one or two just companies or entrepreneurs today that are listening. I get this question all the time, and I really don't know the answer because I've never asked you. But if we use it as a model, why did Rise of the Rest? Why did you all invest in AppHarvest? And Steve, why did you and your team believe that this was a good model that you wanted to reinvest in? So for those other entrepreneurs or innovators or companies, looking for capital, what attracted you to zoom it into Morehead here and zoom it into AppHarvest? What attracted you to our story and what we were doing?
Well, Revolution, we have the Rise of the Rest Seed Fund, Revolution Ventures, and Revolution Growth. So kind of early stage, a little bit later stage, and then more in the growth mode. And how we think about investing, how we underwrite for investing, how we do our due diligence around investing is different for each of the three. In the case of AppHarvest, it was an early seed investment. It really was an idea, and you were quite aggressive in trying to get our attention in terms of really trying to help us understand what you were building. And so we do back at that, particularly at that early stage, people. We're looking for somebody who has the vision, but also the ability to build a team to execute. We are looking to back big ideas in the case of really trying to reimagine food systems, and particularly focus on doing it in Eastern Kentucky was really intriguing to us. We weren't aware of some of the specifics that you were able to bring to bear in terms of the much lower water use and the central location of Eastern Kentucky in terms of distributing around the country. So we were captivated by the idea and really believed in you as the entrepreneur. Then it became a question of, well, that's all sounds good, but can this really happen? And anytime you're backing a company at that early stage, there's always some risk associated with it. But I think often investors focus too much on the risk factors, what might go wrong, and not enough on what might go right. And we suspended our disbelief and said, okay, if this works, this really could be a very significant and valuable company, and also a very impactful company that could be one of the cornerstones of a better food system that really could provide more food to more people in a much more efficient, and much more sustainable, and much smarter way. And we're glad we made that bet, even when 60 Minutes, as you know, I guess 4 years ago, was following us around the country and ultimately did a story. And one of the parts of it, they wanted to focus on AppHarvest. When they're filming it, you were still just in the early stages of building that first facility in Moorhead. So even then, we weren't quite sure how it was going to play out. And when we visited, my wife Jean and I visited last year. It was just amazing to see what you had built, and the fact that people in that area of around Moorhead suddenly had jobs and opportunity that they wouldn't have otherwise had. And we really do believe you're in the kind of the bottom of the first inning in terms of what's possible in terms of building AppHarvest and being a part of this broader solution, which is why it's great that you're focusing on this on World Food Day.
Steve, we'll get to a question from high school students that we've invested heavily in high school education. Is there anything high school students can do to become involved in building a resilient food system? And what would you say to young people? And I do think it's important, Steve, that people listening understand. February 2018, we raised $250,000 in our first seed round. I had personally maxed out my credit cards in order to start AppHarvest. And that's how quickly things can escalate. This year, we went public on the NASDAQ and raised almost $500 million, and it seems overwhelming. I'm in this other side of the coin, but to a young person who's looking to start a company, what would you say to high school students in the area that want to stay here and build great companies?
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to drop off in a minute to do something else, but I would say that believe in yourself. Believe that you have the potential to change the world. It's not about somebody else doing it. It's about you doing something. If you see some problem in the world that you want to fix, go fix it. If you see some opportunity emerging, go pursue it. Do what Jonathan did. Do what I did, 35 years ago in starting America Online, when most people didn't believe in the internet. Most people didn't think people needed the internet. We believed, and we said, instead of just watching it from the sidelines, we're going to get into the middle of it. And then second step is then figuring out, how do you actually do that? What is your idea? How do you take it to the next level? How do you build a team around it? Because it's not about the entrepreneurs, it's about the team they build. Entrepreneurship is really a team sport. How do you tell your story so you can attract some of that initial capital, even if it's just a small amount of money, to get your idea on the playing field? And then as you start getting traction, just make sure you're super serving your customers. You're listening really carefully, because you learn a lot from those early customers, and over time you get smarter about what you're doing. So I really do believe entrepreneurs can change the world, and we've seen that across a lot of different sectors. I think the next 10 or 20 years could be the golden years of entrepreneurship in the most important sectors, like food, like healthcare, and so forth. So anybody out there listening, I'd just say, look around, see what could be done better, and then don't just comment on it or observe it. Jump in and do something about it.
Steve, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing the next great food tech companies coming out of this region, but we appreciate your early commitment in our work here. Steve Case, founder of AOL, founder of Revolution's Rise of the Rest Seed Fund. Thank you, Steve, for joining us today.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you all. Look forward to seeing you again in Moorhead soon.
And to keep it rolling here, really excited about this conversation. These are two individuals that I've admired from afar, but get to have a good conversation with you all this morning. Ashley Smith is the CEO of Black Soil, someone working hard in the region to make sure that all the voices in agriculture are heard, and we've looked forward to our partnership with you over the last year. And then someone I recently got to know is Holly Harris Phillips, president of Appalachian Regional Healthcare, and look forward to discussing, Holly, the role between health and diet and the health outcomes that individuals have in their daily lives. Ashley, first with you, we've been fortunate to partner with you on the CSA boxes. Tell us why you founded Black Soil, and explain to anyone that doesn't know Black Soil, what is your work?
Well, good morning. I'm so glad to be with everyone today. Thank you, Jonathan and the team, for having me. In August of 2017, we really asked a question. If Mother Nature can't see who puts the seed in the ground, then why do we have such enormous disparities in agriculture? And so since 2017, we've really worked hard to help reconnect Black Kentuckians to their heritage and legacy in agriculture. And that's looked like partnerships with AppHarvest, which have allowed us to take the 1.4% of Kentucky Black farmers and help them increase that market share. We just really want to emphasize being Kentucky proud, being able to support farmers in urban and rural communities across the state. So thanks again for having us.
Thanks, Ashley. And hopefully, I think it's this horrible mic down here that might be the issue. Holly, you have an incredibly important role in the region. I believe Appalachian Regional Healthcare is the largest health system in Eastern Kentucky. Your viewpoints on the connection between food and health, and I know we were just talking earlier about the food choices we make on the front end and the prevention that can take place. Where do you see Appalachian Regional Healthcare playing a role between food and health outcomes?
Well, Jonathan and everyone from AppHarvest, thank you for hosting this phenomenal event, World Food Day, and having us here and with Ashley to be part of this exciting conversation about food and nutrition and how we do truly start to change the healthcare model from a model that is truly focused on sick care to one of healthcare, wellness, and prevention. And at ARH, we strongly believe that food choices, fruits, vegetables, learning how to cook fruits and vegetables in the proper nutritious ways is where that impact can start early on. It was interesting to hear Steve Case talk about this too, because we serve about a population of about 350,000 people across Eastern Kentucky and into the state of West Virginia. We have 13 hospitals across the region, and the model of healthcare exists today, pays us a lot of money to take care of sick people in hospital beds and a lot of money to do a lot of surgeries on people that could be prevented with proper food and nutrition choices.
Holly, personally, I think this is incredibly important, and the voice that we can play in this global food conversation. I don't know that there's many, leaders of a healthcare system like yours that would come out and speak on this, which is contrary to your business model. But we have a broken system in the U.S. where incentives don't align. Ashley, I would say to you, where do you see the similarities between, we're in a rural community today, but whether it's rural or urban, and this is what we try to say, if you're in a low-income area, whether you're in rural or urban, those food outcomes are very similar, and then the health impacts that come with that. What do you see, Ashley? Is there a connection between low income and the food options that are available and the health outcomes associated with that? And do you see a connection, in rural areas and urban areas that face these same challenges? Or from your viewpoint, Ashley, how do you see the landscape here in the region?
Oh, absolutely. So Black Soil is focused on Kentucky. We really want to be based here in our home state. And I spent several years working with the Kentucky Rural Urban Exchange. It's a community engagement organization that's statewide that helped me travel across the Commonwealth exploring the shared social issues and inequities. So within our urban and rural communities, you see dilapidated infrastructure, disinvestment, scarcity when it comes to resources and assets within our healthcare industry. And so if we can find the ways in which our humanity unites us, we all have to eat. We study with Black Soil the decline in Black farmers, Black rural-based farmers, and that increased concentration of food deserts, food insecurity within urban communities. And so from there we say the urban community needs the rural community because that's where we have more prosperous access to land. That rural farmer needs to also know that they can put that seed in the ground and they have a market. So if we can start to reduce the ways that society wants to divide us and see how in the rural and urban landscapes we're really struggling with the same issues: substance use, overcriminalization, lack of jobs, lack of investment. And so if we see food as the key, the equalizer, if we can increase that access, it will help the socially conscious driven companies like Black Soil continue to grow and retain that talent, much like your earlier conversation with Steve.
Yeah, and Ashley, we definitely share that viewpoint that food is a commonality. We try to say we can keep putting chairs at the table. You can make the table bigger, keep inviting people into this conversation, which I do think our region can lead on. I do think the challenge is the opportunity, and Holly, Steve mentioned it. Kentucky faces a lot of challenges as it relates to health. From your viewpoint, where are the opportunities? Whether it's heart disease, diabetes, whether it's diet and high fructose corn syrup or sugary foods, where is the biggest challenge, is the biggest opportunity, but what can we be doing here in this region to lead, and where do you think the biggest opportunities are?
And you're right, Jonathan. Unfortunately, our region does lead the country in terms of diabetes, heart disease, cancer. In one of our communities in Perry County, Kentucky, we lead the nation in terms of lung cancer. So we have to change these statistics, and honestly, it starts with conversations like this. It starts with partnerships with our communities, partnerships like we're having today with AppHarvest, with Black Soil. It starts with our children. How do we teach our children how to move again, how to play, how to eat healthy, and how to make just good choices? I really feel that that's been lost a lot in the public health and public education sector, and I think we have to come together in terms of the ag tech, healthcare, and the educational system that is out there to have the type of impact and to change the health status of the region. It's not something we can alone do as a health system anymore.
And Ashley, with, again, doubling down on that, bringing us all together, where are the opportunities in this state, to bring, more and more awareness to food, the food choices we make? Where do you see the most opportunity in helping bridge the gap that might otherwise divide us in these conversations?
I think the investment in kind of the hidden figures in your community. There are leaders who are ready to take the reins and receive investment. It might not always be capital, it could be technical assistance. In the last 4 years doing this work, we've seen, this reclamation, this redemption, a wave across the state of people wanting to get back onto the land. So I think we kind of hang there and encourage that. So, we've received support from industry partners like Farm Credit Mid-America that have really put their money where their mouth is, and they're helping us build up new farmers, those people who we truly believe have the highest calling, growing our food. They're helping us construct high tunnels and greenhouses in urban and rural communities facing food insecurity. And so this openness of people being interested of where their food is coming from helps us really capture a long-term opportunity to keep this conversation of how can we unite around this common goal.
Yeah, and Holly, we were talking about this earlier. You all are exploring the concept of a new campus for Appalachian Regional Healthcare. And, how do we reimagine what a hospital really is, right? You were saying, and it was an observation I wasn't aware of, but makes sense, unfortunately, that you have nurses working the night shift and the only food available to them is what's in a vending machine, and what's in a vending machine is high in sodium, high in sugar, high in saturated fats, and that's a hospital. So how can we reimagine what is a healthcare campus? Like, what does it look like? What needs should it serve? And the concept of a pharmacy and having, fresh fruits and vegetables available alongside, your prescription medications. But what are the possibilities you all are thinking through and envisioning? What does the healthcare campus of the future look like?
We are super excited about a project that we are working on in Bell County, Kentucky, that will be a true shining star for the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and it will be that is focused on health. And Jonathan, as you were mentioning, we really see across our whole system, we operate retail pharmacies in every community that we're in, and we see next to our retail pharmacies where people truly do need prescription medications, but we see the opportunity to have a pharmacy where we have partners that supply fruits and vegetables, fresh eggs, fresh meats for our employees and our patients to buy. Unfortunately, the healthcare workforce is some of the most unhealthy people in our country and in our region, and we have to improve the access points for nutritious choices for them. We recently have invested in a vice president of employee wellness for our system, and we're super excited about putting initiatives in place that focus on wellness opportunities starting with our employees, and then how do we partner in our communities, and how do we bring those partnerships onto this new health campus and provide those access points, whether it's from the pharmacy standpoint, whether it's through an educational center that we hope to see on this campus that can truly teach people about health, about movement, about how do we eat and how do we cook. We're having some great conversations with another partner about training our dietary staff in culinary opportunities to cook healthy fruits and vegetables. So I think just a lot of exciting new ways of thinking about things is where this all starts.
So to anyone listening, and I know we've got a university president here today, Dr. Morgan from Morehead State. I'm sure there's a couple other universities tuning in. We have the leader of Appalachian Regional Healthcare putting her hand up saying, I want to lead on what it means to have a healthcare campus. There's nothing stopping us but ourselves and making this possible. And Holly, I challenge anyone listening, anyone tuning in, reach out and let's figure out how to collaborate and create these healthcare campuses of the future. It's, we need to have the real conversation about what place prevention plays in this. And you're right. The unfortunate thing is it is a threat, in essence, to a healthcare system's business model. But we don't have a choice. And I think it's bigger. It really is getting to a point where it's bigger than us. I mean, we're looking in the middle of COVID. You look at who's most heavily impacted by COVID. It's people with pre-existing conditions. It's our friends and family that, have issues that many of which are related to food. And healthcare will bankrupt the U.S. if we continue down this track. We cannot continue with these rising health costs and declining health outcomes and just completely reimagining what does it mean to be a health provider. And Holly, the exciting thing for me is we have a champion in this region who wants to lead on the topic, and you're sitting right across from me. So I hope many people listening today reach out to you. And this region not only has the opportunity to lead on growing fruits and vegetables, but we really do have an opportunity to lead on health and redefining what that means. Ashley, COVID. During COVID, what are some of the most important learning lessons that you've gathered that reshape the way in which you look at how you're running Black Soil? And coming out of COVID, what do you see your priorities and where you're going to be spending your time the most?
COVID redefined our business. Up until March 2020, we were an agritourism company. Like, I would have loved to host you at a farm and have a beautiful farm-to-table dinner. And unfortunately, with the shutdown, that wasn't possible. And so in June of that year, we launched our CSA. So every week for 20 weeks, subscribers would come to a historic art theater and they would pick up their shares. And from there, we continued to gain momentum. And there was like no closing that door and going back. So it was, our weekly farm share program is here to stay, and it has allowed us to advance our vision, which is increasing procurement opportunities for farmers. Because as you know, if you put that seed in the ground, you have nowhere to place it, nowhere to sell it, nowhere to build that relationship with that, purchaser on a long-term basis. Your farm's hanging on by a thread. As we move through this defining moment of COVID-19, we're focusing on increasing minority business enterprise spend on a corporate level. So we've, again, research-based, we can reduce a 333-year gap in 15 years if we establish a base percentage and then we increase that by 1% every year. So we're seeing that as an opportunity not only for the core farmers that we've been working with for the past 4 years, but, doing this work, we've encountered all types of farmers. And so bringing in more diversity and inclusion in our Eastern Kentucky region, we work with white farmers, farmers of all ages, ethnicities, across the spectrum. So we're really excited to see how COVID has given us this redefining pivot that has then allowed us to gain more legitimacy, relationships, so we can really hit it hard for the sustainability of our industry.
So to the both of you, it's UN World Food Day. We're going to have this conversation every year around World Food Day. This is our first symposium. Last night we had music here in downtown Moorhead, and we'll continue to do that in the years to come. 10 years from now, the UN's invited you to come speak about the work that's already done. All your plans are successful. Your legacy's in place. What is that legacy over the next 10 years? We're done. It's the future. We're in 2031. It's already happened. What are we looking back at? What work have you accomplished over the next 10 years in your grandiose, most big picture vision for you and where you're leading your organization?
Honestly, I think for ARH, it's the concept of redefining healthcare and redefining what it means to truly have a health system. So I'm hopeful in 10 years that we have truly moved the needle in terms of the health status of the population. So when the next pandemic hits our region, that our people can survive. Honestly, what we have seen throughout COVID, due to the comorbidities that exist in our population, if you do not get vaccinated, and if you have the comorbidities that exist, it's a death sentence. I mean, it is so sad, and it has crippled our region in many ways. So I am very hopeful with the work that we are trying to do at ARH and the partnerships that we have, that looking back in 10 years, that our region is no longer leading the country in terms of heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. We can do better than this, and I invite anyone to come partner with us, and let's lead this charge together.
And Ashley, same thing to you. So 10 years from now, you're at a UN event, you've been invited to speak about the work you've accomplished over the next 10 years. It's 2031. What's the vision of Black Soil?
We will have grown from 31 Kentucky counties to all 120 counties. We would have moved the needle from being 1.4% to at least 10 to 15% of the overall farmers in the state. We will have secured our own teaching and incubator farm that will allow us to provide new and beginning farmers that home base, so where they can really be set out after they've gained the experience in market procurement and that type of thing. So we just would love to continue on this path and journey with each of you, and again, so glad to be here.
And what do you see the biggest challenges are? So you've gotten there, it's 10 years from now, but rewinding to right now, what are the biggest challenges and roadblocks, between now and your success over the next 10 years?
Honestly, the biggest challenge for us and healthcare as an entity is related to the payer side of the equation. the insurance companies have to fundamentally change the way they do business and how they reimburse us for the care that we deliver. You know, we get paid a lot of money to do open heart surgeries, and we get paid a lot of money to keep patients in an ICU bed. What about paying us for all of the community outreach we do, all the community and health education we do, all of the physicals and wellness visits that we do? So that has to change. And we also have to bring our federal and state government to the table. Our payer mix is about 70% dependent upon the federal and state government. So we have to have them participating in this journey.
So it sounds like to me one do-out coming out of this is a roundtable discussion with the appropriate people to help figure out how we can realign incentives. I call out Humana, who's in Louisville. We've got, you know, many political leaders right and left side of the aisle that I think could be helpful with you. And, you know, again, the challenge is the opportunity. The challenge is, you know, we're leading in diabetes, we're leading in heart disease, you know, we're leading in cancer. Horrible. From a human aspect, those are our friends, those are our family. It needs to change. And to get there, it's realigning incentives. And so, you know, let's put together a round table. Let's challenge people in the region to sit at the table with you, and let's figure out how, you know, Kentucky can lead. The challenge is the opportunity. Same thing with you, Ashley. 10 years from now, you've already succeeded. But right now, what are your biggest hurdles or obstacles that you have to overcome between now and the success that you're going to see over the next 10 years?
I would say two things: accessing capital, and secondly, retention of talent. Helping folks who are in our urban or rural communities see themselves in Kentucky in brand new ways that makes them want to stay and be flourishing, thriving business owners contributing to their local communities. So if we lose, much like we have our high school students watching, you know, to leave the state and not to return, that affects us for generations to come as well.
That is important. I know we have some high school students that I'll be with in a moment after this, driving out to our farm to see them. To our best and brightest, I think it's something we need to constantly challenge. We need you here. We need you rebuilding our state, and you don't need to be 45 or 50 or 65. We need people with experience. They will mentor you, but as an 18-year-old in Kentucky, you have the access to the same information someone in London, Singapore, Hong Kong, New York does. That is the digital age. We need you here, you know, soaking up that information, leading with us. With that, Holly, you were just in New York. We're going to take this show on the road. We're going to have the conversations here, but we're going to go get support and bring it back. You know, what were some key takeaways from your conversation a couple of weeks ago at the New York Ag Tech Conference that you spoke at?
Honestly, I think people were a little shocked by the things that I had to say. I think people don't think about the challenges that we face in eastern Kentucky and in southern West Virginia, and the fact that we truly live in a food desert in that region. You know, you talked about our nurses eating from a vending machine that are working the night shift. Well, think about many of the families that their grocery store is the Dollar General, or their groceries are coming from the gas station. You know, that's sort of a foreign concept to a lot of people across the country, and especially in a place like New York City. So I think we have to continue this conversation and educate everyone about the challenges that we are facing, because what Ag Tech is doing, and Ashley, what you all are doing by opening up those access points and availability, that has to just continue to funnel into our region to truly make the impact that we want to see. You know, we're excited when we have farmers that come up and want to participate in some of the farmers markets that we host on our hospital campuses, but we don't want that to be one Saturday a month. We want it to be every day, just part of our normal day at ARH. So a lot of work, but Jonathan, you're right. We do have to take this show on the road and just continue the educational piece of this, because people don't truly understand what we are facing in this region. And, you know, to all the high school kids out there, we need you to stay here in the Commonwealth and come home and serve and work for the mission of ARH, the mission of Black Soil, the mission of AppHarvest. You know, we're all in different businesses, but our missions align.
And we will take that show on the road. We'll get support from outside the region. But as we close today, I think it's important to remember we are the region, and you all are two iconic leaders leading great organizations. It's our responsibility to help you achieve your goals, and all of us to help each other. So this is our first discussion on World Food Day. I invite you all back next year so we can discuss the progress. We coming out of COVID have kind of tamped this back this year. We're really excited about having this discussion next year and continuing it every year in the years ahead. But let's all remember, great ideas can come from anywhere. It's our job to work together and support each other and make those ideas a reality. So thank you for your work, Holly. Thank you for your work, Ashley. And thank you to everyone that tuned in today for the AppHarvest World Food Day Symposium. We'll be back next year for World Food Day, checking on the progress we've made over the next 12 months. Thank you.